We'll probably have a little bit of a lag.
Yep. I think we're live.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Glad everyone can join us. If you're joining us live on Sail22's Facebook page, my name's Josh Toso. I'm stepping in, guest commentating, guest moderating for this great session that we have today for you all. So we're running a quick session today and really going to discuss running a socially distant regatta. And we're joined today by 3 members of Sail22 and the Vanguard 15 class. And they're going to talk to us a little bit about how they ran a socially distant regatta and their experience running the Lake Max Vanguard 15 series over the past 3 Saturdays. And they really did a great job running this series over the past 3 weekends, really kind of abiding by Indiana state regulations, CDC guidelines, and putting into practice the best social distancing practices, really utilizing Zoom video technology for skippers meetings and debriefs, and also utilizing MarkSet bots for race course management and race committee operations. So before we kind of get into it, and you know, the main idea here is to learn from these experiences. We're all kind of learning together. I think we're all getting better and better each time that we get out there. And hopefully by the middle of the summer, we're all running full tilt. But before we get into it, just like to introduce our panelists. We have Ed Furry, who's the owner of Sail22 on the left. Meghan O'Rourke, who's the Vanguard 15 class president in the middle. And Shawn Wilson, who's the Sail22 and Vanguard 15 technical committee all by himself. So welcome guys, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for being a moderator for this. It's awesome.
Yeah, no problem. This is really cool what you guys have been doing here. And I know that not to let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but I know you guys are working on a little bit of a documentary that you'll be releasing a little bit, maybe later this week or early next week. And I've got to see a little sneak peek of that, and it's really going to be cool. So anyone who's paying attention and tuning in, definitely keep your eyes peeled for that documentary. That's going to be really cool. But as we start out, you know, Ed, why don't you just kind of give us a quick kind of overview of you know, how this started and what your kind of goals were out of this, and what you guys did.
Well, first of all, it basically all started because we were all quarantined here at Sail22 headquarters. Shawn works for us, and Meghan got stuck here being a Chicago school teacher. And it kind of is probably fairly convenient for everyone because I was able to have employees and babysitters, and we have 6.5 acres. And so even though we had a little bit of space, I think we all started to get the itch to go sailing. And Meghan and Shawn, you know, kind of came to me and said, you know, Vanguard 15s are easy to sail, and there's really, you know, easy ways to do it. And so they approached me on the subject. And I think from that point, then it was just, you know, seeing how we can do it, both safe for everybody, but also logistically, which is obviously another challenge too.
Meghan, so being the Vanguard 15 class president, you know, kind of how did the Vanguard 15 start getting involved in this and connected with Ed and Shawn, you know, to get this going?
Yeah, so as Ed mentioned, I was quarantined here as well. But one big thing as the V15 class, what we're trying to do is we're doing a whole reboot right now. And we had a class meeting, an officer meeting, and we kind of saw the pandemic and as more of an opportunistic opportunity for us. We are able to sail with 2 people, and these are the perfect boats to still remain socially distanced, but get on the water. So that's why we then kind of went to that and we're like, hey, let's combine our powers right now and make a regatta happen.
And Shawn, from a technical committee side, you know, I'm sure it must have been quite a job trying to get all these boats, you know, organized. And I think we'll get into a little bit later into the interview about the operations that you guys went through. But you know, overall and top line, what type of undertaking was it to make sure that you abided by some of these social distancing regulations with multiple boats, and I think you guys had up to 15 boats at one time out there.
Yeah, it definitely was a challenge. I mean, really my role in this is just kind of, you know, working on like logistics, and Meghan really planned everything, and then, you know, we just kind of make it happen. But, you know, moving the boats around and keeping people, you know, separated while rigging was definitely, you know, a bit of a challenge. I think each, you know, event, it got better and better. We kind of, after every event, would sit down and talk about what worked, what didn't. And by the third one, it was pretty easy, and everybody was kind of used to it. And really just, you know, what I look forward to with this is, you know, with everything being, you know, virtual on Zoom and everything, you know, starting to think of ways that we can make, you know, if you don't have an in-person debrief, and it's hard to do, you know, really like coaching, you know, right there with people, how can we, you know, how can we supplement that and make a virtual debrief worthwhile? And getting to play with some new technologies. So with like the Sail Norwich analytics, and we were putting instruments in some of the boats to record all their data, and then, you know, using video and just a whole lot of different things that basically, you know, instead of, if you don't have a debrief immediately after sailing, you can go home for a few days and then get together online and still be able to recall the races and be able to look at tracking and everything and still get some good information. So that was a lot of fun, for sure. And we're still working the bugs out with that. Definitely.
Well, and I think we're definitely going to dive in a little bit to that a little bit later. Go ahead, Ed.
I was going to say, I'm going to hijack a little bit on Shawn, because the non-technical side of Shawn was, he was basically the one that moved the boats up and down. We're a mile away from the launch beach, and, you know, to keep people away from each other, Shawn basically, on our little flatbed trailer and our gator, you know, ran the boats up and down, you know, pretty much single-handedly. So from a grunt labor standpoint, that's what he did. From a technical standpoint, I'm not sure you've ever put together a race course right next to a sheep pasture and worked with the technology to make sure the data was going to happen. But then I'm like, who's the guy wandering around my field, you know, with race marks, trying to figure out, you know, what's going to work the best and get the best data. So
a handful of instruments,
yeah,
you know, just tacking my way up the grass. So,
you know, he kind of did the heavy lifting, so to speak. Meghan did the kind of the hard part, as in, you know, computer calls, emails, all those logistics. I, you know, kept, you know, us at Sail22 going, and kind of was, you know, more of someone to bounce things off of, both ideas and a little bit of approval, because, you know, it's our property and, you know, our business, but just kind of making sure it worked, but then also kind of the PRO side of things. So they definitely did most of the work, but they definitely split things up appropriately, you know, which makes sense too.
Yeah. And I'd like to, you know, kind of get into the operations a little bit and start kind of from the start there. And just before I do, you know, we are kind of monitoring a little bit the comments here. So if you are tuning in, feel free to post a question in here, and we'll ask the guys and girls your questions if we get some time. You might see me looking down a couple times here and there. We do have people joining in from San Diego, California, and CRA, and Southwestern Yacht Club. We got Port Credit Yacht Club joining in, Bayview Yacht Club in Detroit, Chicago Yacht Club joining in, and many others. So make sure you log in any questions you got, and we'll ask these guys your questions. But I want to start off kind of from the start, and I think, Meghan, that kind of starts with you in terms of working through the Vanguard 15 class and getting people to kind of join in on this. Still, when people, I think, were a little bit probably uneasy about how these regattas or the series would work. You know, everything from creating an NOR to your SIs and getting people to register. kind of walk us through a little bit, in terms of the series. Did you have people competing in the entire series or just, one of the races? And how did that work? And how did you work through kind of the NOR, SIs and skippers meeting type of operations?
Yeah, so one big thing that we had to think about when going into this is we wanted to make sure our competitors all felt safe. We're not going to have people come down here and race if they do not feel safe. So we needed to put expectations in right at the beginning. A lot of people were a little apprehensive about coming and competing. They said it was too soon. We should still be at our stay-at-home order. But once we started talking about what we were going to put in place to make sure that everyone was to stay socially distant, more people started registering. So some things that we put in place were having staggered launches. So not everyone's down at the boat ramp at the same time. We had one group go first and they were running drills while the second group came in, rigged and launched. And then we flipped that when we were coming back in. So the one group would stay out and do drills after racing, and one group would come in, de-rig, and move their boat. So that's just one way we're trying to keep people separate. Another thing that we did was we didn't have any parties after racing. As soon as people got off the water, they were asked to go home. And that's kind of where that virtual debrief went in. We also had pre-recorded skippers meetings. Instead of doing a live Zoom skippers meeting, we decided to do a pre-recorded one, which allowed competitors to watch it at their own time, not at the same time. And we also requested for competitors to still reply all to any questions they might have in the skippers meeting. Allowing them to reply all kept the conversation going, and it was as if we were all together still morning of racing, talking through what was going to happen. Those are just some things that we put in place. And once these things were in place, more and more competitors felt safe and wanted to come out racing. From the first week, we had 7 boats, and on the second weekend, we had 14 boats. So we doubled in size in 1 week just because of everything that we were putting in place.
I think the challenge also was the social distancing, because even though, we put into place that, this is what, you got to watch things, I think, I know we grew from that because every week we would talk, and that was the biggest subject. And it's not because people were blatantly, that we forget. And so we literally put 6 feet on the side of the sprinter van that was, what we carried sails and that type of thing in. And it's a long way. And so, those things were important. We reminded people that, they were close, but, still, keep your distance a little bit because, we all have to just pay attention because sometimes we get closer than 6 feet, which is pretty far away. So like every week we rebooted and said, okay, what do we need to do to change? This is what was happening. So-and-so was late. And so we just, we made sure we stayed on top of that. So
I think we learned a lot from the first one because, really you planned it and, not doing this before, there were a lot of things different from the first to second. And, you go to kind of optimistic, like, oh, everybody knows, how to social distance and everybody will be good. We reminded them, but it's incredible how quickly people just revert back to normal, like how, a regatta should be. It's really on our minds, we're constantly thinking about it because, we're running the event and organizing it. But for like a competitor, you have to, since it was on our mind so much, we assumed, oh yeah, everybody will be thinking about it. But the reality is, people have to be reminded pretty constantly. And it's really easy just to fall back into old habits.
I found it very interesting. You just said, Ed, you put a 6 feet on the side of the van. You think that I think that at least from what I have experienced, people don't really know exactly how far 6 feet really is when they start talking to each other. Do you find that beneficial, having that inside the van, really letting people know what that distance is?
I put it on the side of the van and I was like, this really 6 feet? I mean, I'm 6 feet tall, but I don't, when I think of myself as 6 feet tall, I'm not out of my feet or at my heads. I'm at my eyes. And so to say, that's 6 feet tall, it's like, well, is that 6 feet tall? No, that is 6 feet tall. And I think, it surprised me too. And, it helped me a ton, because literally I'd be talking to someone and I'm like, oh, I'm too close. I'd be 5 feet away or 4 feet away, and that's fairly far from a normal conversation. And so, yes, I think 6 feet was definitely Megan's idea was, hey, can we do this? And we luckily have a vinyl cutter, and we're like, yeah, we can do that. And yeah, I was amazed at how important that really was.
Yeah,
Megan,
and even to enforce that 6 feet, because as Shawn said, so many people go back to their habits so easily. So it's so natural to move close to someone when you're having a conversation. So we had, in each group, we picked about 3 people to be the constant reminders, and they were just competitors. We just asked them if they see, kind of just be the eyes. If they see people, please remind them to stay separate, because sometimes it's not always in the forefront of what we're doing.
Megan, what are some of the other considerations that you took into consideration, so to speak, within building the sailing instructions? Things that you may have not built in a regular regatta that didn't have this type of situation?
Yeah. So one big thing that, while I was planning it, I literally had to think of myself as a competitor, where I was going to be, what I was going to be touching, and just constantly be thinking about that. And I went through the entire event thinking of as a competitor and as an RC and what we needed to put in place. So one big thing that we did put in place is we required all boats to carry a VHF. This just made communication on the water a lot easier. In dinghy racing, especially while you're coaching, there's a lot of screaming. And that's just one way. So we don't have to get close to boats. We were easily able to communicate. We also talked about, we also had everyone wear buffs. If you were staying 6 feet apart, we weren't requiring them to pull it up, and that's an Indiana state law right now. But if with rigging and working together, if you did have to go inside that 6 feet, we required everyone to just quickly pull up their buff and help, and then move outside of that 6 feet range. We also asked, we did not have like a community beer cooler or community food. We required all competitors to bring their own food, water, any beverage, just because if we thought about how many hands are going into one cooler to pull out a beer, and how quickly that could spread germs.
You talked a little bit about staggering launching. One of the things I noticed in some of your sailing instructions were not only staggering launching, but staggering people's, or at least separating out people's arrival areas. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we had one group would meet at the launch ramp, and the second group would come up to Sail22, and that's kind of how we kept them separate. We gave them names. It was the port and starboard groups, and we just made sure that they were separate. And as boats started to go out in the starboard group, we would bring port boats down. So making sure that we're all not congregating in the same area was the big thing that we were focusing on.
And so kind of getting to the operations on water, and Ed, I want to kind of go at you here as the quote unquote PRO. Can you walk us through a little bit in terms of how the race committee worked out on the water? Once you got out, you got the first group did the drills while the second group was launching. Once you were all out there, how did you ensure the good racing and the good race course management out on the water?
So the biggest thing that we thought of with all this is, how do we keep our numbers down with race committee and keep, a proper course? And so, we contacted MarkSetBot and basically said, hey, can we, what's it going to cost for this to happen? Will you sponsor it and that type of thing? And so we leased one MarkSetBot, and we that allowed us, to basically the first week we did, 2 marks, 2 pins, and a floating committee boat. And then we also had a coach boat. So, that limited people because we had 2 boats. So we had 2 people per boat. The first 2 worked with each other, and so they were close. And then the other one was family and distance, because we were on a boat that was big enough that we had Finn for a mark set bot on the bow, and basically I was at the stern to keep the 6 feet of distance for that. And so, and then keep it simple with 3-minute starts and short, basic dinghy style racing. When we knew we were going to be down just to 1 boat, the following weekend, we actually were able to talk Markset Bot into bringing us another mark. And so we were able to use one as the basically committee boat that could move, and one as the weather mark. And so we were able to then have 1 pin set, and the rest of the 2 others could rotate the whole course as needed. And that's where it made it really easy, because if the course changed, you can move 2 marks, and it squared things up. And I think that was definitely made life really easy. The last day, actually, I couldn't be there to be the PRO, but we had Dave Gerber from Chicago Yacht Club, and we had 2 Markset bots. I was able to check in from shore and just make sure. But the reality is the Markset bots are so solid that we were able to put a starting system in one of them, and Finn was racing for Markset bot, and he was able to run everything from his boat while racing.
Yeah, so basically Finn on his iPhone in between races, if we needed a course adjustment, Dave would, ask for it, and then he would move the bot from the Vanguard, and then hit a button, it would do a starting sequence. So really, with the setup we had, the Markset bots are incredible for this. We wouldn't have necessarily needed any power boat out there or any race committee. It could all be run by somebody who's a competitor racing, and yeah, I mean, the only thing you'd have to do would be score yourselves. But if the first boat would have just stopped and started writing down, who finishes after them, or you write boat ahead and behind on a little notepad, that we really didn't need a race committee.
We have another panelist who wants to join us, I think, over there. Meghan, you mentioned that you had all the boats carry a VHF, and I think that's probably not typical for small dinghy boats, especially Vanguard 15s. How did you see that as a big benefit on the race course getting out? And then how did you work through that within working with the Markset bots and the race course management as well?
Yeah, so as we were talking about, everyone had to have a VHF, and we did have VHFs available for people to borrow. So making sure that every single boat was important. And the way that we ran races and communicated with competitors is, as Shawn mentioned, we had Finn, who was running Markset bot from his boat, and we had Dave Gerber, who was in our RC boat tracking scores. They were on channel 7-8, while all competitors were on 6-9. So if RC needed to talk to competitors, they went to 6-9, and for any RC, or if Dave and Finn needed to talk, they were on 7-8. I feel like even if we weren't in a pandemic right now, that VHF should be required on dinghy boats. It just makes communication so much easier. And we even had a situation where someone flipped and their mask got stuck in the mud, and it was just, instead of screaming, they grabbed their VHF and was like, our mask is stuck in the mud. And then we were immediately able to come over without asking any questions and knowing how we can support them. So I feel like from a safety standpoint and from a socially distancing standpoint, carrying a VHF should be more regular in the dinghy sailing.
Well, I think luckily dinghy wear PFDs as a requirement. And, I think that's obviously helps a lot, but I also think, if you're considering running a regatta on a boat that you might not have to wear a PFD, I would probably recommend that your competitors wear a PFD as well. As race committee, we did, and I think that's pretty important, kind of moving forward with all of sailing. And a big boat's different if it's sometimes you can't move around, but anything really under about 25 feet, find your own PFD and make sure, you wear one, you're comfortable with it. So I think that makes a big difference.
One thing with, especially with the little boats and the dinghies, having the need for a safety boat or a crash boat is pretty important because, like Megan said, one of the boats they needed, assistance from a power boat, and really the course setup we did was kind of taken from something we do with the Vanguards a lot, but tweaked a little bit. And this could be done even without, a mark set bot. But instead of having an anchored committee boat as one end of the line, we set 2 marks. In our case, there's a mark set bot and then a fixed pin. And then during the starts and finishes, the power boat would just kind of sit and they'd drift in line with those 2 marks. And, they could still call boats over early, but it let them, after the start, be able to kind of chase the boats up the course and stay with the fleet and then quickly zoom off. And, if a boat needed help and they were called away, we'd still have a finish line in place. The boats could still keep finishing. And really, that was a small adjustment in the SIs for that. Just by saying that during the start, the power boat, may or may not be anchored in line with the 2 marks. It's treated as an obstacle, but not a mark of the course. And I mean, that seemed to work out well. And then the other thing is it gives you a gate for your lured mark. So, we doing shorthanded race committee for V15s a lot. We'll just use the finishing pin as the lured mark, which also works great. But when you have like 15 boats, it's nice to have a gate. So having 2 marks, really, I mean, it's an easy way to have, a good race course without needing, essentially more than 1 boat that acts as your crash boat, race committee boat, does everything.
Yeah. Shawn, I want to get into a little bit of the management of the boats with you and, understanding, was it all BYOB, kind of bring your own boats, or did you have some charter boats as well? And how'd you work through the charter boat situation?
So 3 of the boats were owned by the Chicago V15 fleet, but then for the most part, Corinthian Yacht Club. But for the most part, people brought their own boats. The first event was tricky, just because it was the first time people, have sailed their boats all season. And in some cases, the first time people had brought their V15s out in, years. So being on hand with, enough spare parts and equipment. So down, at the launch or wherever the boat was being rigged up, if they needed something, I'd be able to step in and get it fixed quickly versus them kind of running around and asking everybody, oh, do you have an extra blah, blah, blah? Do you, because that just keeps, another way for people to interact. So having, myself down with the boats as they're being rigged with plenty of spares and parts to be able to get people going also moves them through quickly. And you don't have people lingering around and, bouncing around from one boat to another looking for a drain plug. Or something.
Well, in the first week was the smallest group, but also it was, the biggest group of getting boats going for the first time since last, fall. And so, that we started a little late. Shawn and Meghan, unfortunately, because of Shawn having to make sure everyone else was going, missed a couple races, but we still got 7 races off. And I think the biggest thing is just learning because, we then had 14 the next week. They also went to Chicago and made 2 different trips, one each week of the first 2 weeks, to get boats, both charter boats and individuals boats. And so I think that's a pretty big logistical task, being able to move 8 boats, to help people come sailing. And so that was definitely big. And, it's a fleet that, when you live in Chicago, you don't necessarily have a car you can normally just put a boat on. And so, that was something different. And that's why the Vanguard 15 fleet's kind of big there, is because they just put your boat on a rack all year, literally. So I think, just bending over backwards to make this happen was definitely a big part of this.
Yeah, and us having the 4-boat rack and making the trips, actually, I think, helped with the whole social distancing, because instead of, everybody showing up with a bunch of boats car topped and stuff, that requires a lot of people to help flip these boats over and everything. We were kind of able to control, who was loading them, unloading them. So in Chicago, the 2 trips, we had the same people there to help. And, really us managing that and having people just show up and their boat is on a dolly. All they had to do is put the mast up.
And I feel like that's one really big thing is all of our competitors, unless they were bringing their own boat, which I think only about 3 people towed their own boat down, was when the competitors showed up, their boat had their blade bag and sail bag in it. And it was all, as Shawn said, the mast just had to be popped up and then it was ready to sail.
Yeah.
And that was less interaction with everyone else, as you were saying.
Right. And then at the end of the day, take their mess down, leave everything in the boat. We throw it on the flatbed, tow it up, store it here at Sail22. And then that was about it. We would come through like the next day. We'd pull the sprinter van up, take all their blade bags out, put them in the van, take all their sail bags, put them in the sail box in the van. And, it's a little extra work for us, but it really made, it easy to just do your thing, step away, and not be, a ton of people all like trying to fish sails out of like a sail box or something. Mm-hmm. It's all those little things that really kind of make, a launch area or regatta kind of congested when everybody's, diving into one box looking for their blade bag or their set of sails and then putting them away. So doing all that for the competitors definitely made it possible for them to stay, separated from each other.
Yeah. And that kind of came through the walking, like when I was doing the planning process, I literally walked through the entire regatta as if I was a competitor in my head. And I figured out what I would be touching and when I would be touching it and trying to avoid those, the digging and looking and interactions with people.
They definitely got more efficient.
Yeah. One of the things I found interesting, and I would like to, again, encourage people, if they have questions, log them into our chat here on the Facebook Live, and we'll definitely ask these guys your questions. But one of the things I found interesting reading the SIs, and it kind of goes along with that idea of concierge sailing, right, that you're talking about, Shawn, was the idea of the storage and keeping the boats there so that they're there ready to go for the next weekend, and how that worked within payment for storage versus regatta fees and how those work together. And Meghan, I don't know if you kind of worked that into the SIs and the NORs, but I found that pretty interesting if you wanted to kind of explain what I'm talking about a little bit.
Yeah, so what we did is we had our regatta fee, and then since this is outside of Chicago, instead of paying a regatta fee, you were able to store your boat here, and we had a fee for 1 week and a fee for the entire series. And if you were storing your boat down here for a week or a series, we waived your regatta fee. And I feel like doing that really encouraged people to keep their boats down here and it's also easier for competitors. I'm sure they don't want to be roofing their boat and then de-roofing it when they come here. It's just all easier for everyone involved, and makes loading and unloading for us a lot easier as well.
And one of the things I was interested in as well too, and Ed, maybe you can talk about this, first of all, off kind of who was the organizing authority, the OA, on paper for the event, and yourself being the host of the event at Sail22, how did you have to work with the local government and within their regulations, or just at least keeping them informed as to what was going on?
So, organizing authority, technically it was the Chicago Vanguard 15 Fleet 67. We were the host at Sail22, and then we worked with the DNRs who we need to work with locally, but then we also work directly with the town of Culver and the beach. So we're already working with them on what's going on, because we run Max Vanguard Adventure Sailing, which is the junior program spinoff of Max Vanguard Yacht Club. And as a past Commodore of Max Vanguard Yacht Club and running nationals for Sea Scouts and MCs, we've already worked with the DNR. And so we basically went through the guidelines of what the town does and has been doing, as well as, you know, what we need to do with the DNR, with permits and things like that. And so, you know, Indiana, you know, had the stages were a lot more open for what we needed. Our groups, you know, sizes were 50. You know, the outside factor, you know, meant the masks, unless, you know, only if you're within inside of 6 feet of each other. You know, the DNR, actually, our lake was never closed for activity. So we're pretty lucky there. I mean, the fishing boats on the lake this whole time have been crazy because people have time. So a lot of it was things we've already done, and we already fit into the guidelines of what we needed to. So on those sides of things, we were just pretty lucky that our state is open to outdoor activity, and only like state parks and things like that were closed. But even at the stages when we started our regatta, they were even open again already. So that helped out a lot.
And Meghan, did you have to work with any of the regulations, and did you have to have any specific waivers or anything in terms of people coming and kind of sailing at their own risk? Did you have to have any of the competitors kind of do self-temperature checking or anything like that? Or how did you kind of take that you know, risk that they may be taking sailing?
Yeah, so we didn't require temperatures or anything like that. We did make it clear that you are competing at your own risk. We did include that statement in the SIs, as well as a waiver in the SIs stating that here are what we're doing to make sure everyone stays safe, and we need you to also hold yourself accountable for that. If you are competing, you're competing at your own risk. We also sent out many emails saying if you're not feeling well, stay home. We encourage people to race with family members as well, which was kind of cool to see because a lot of people were racing with family members. Like I know Chuck Neville from Columbia Yacht Club was sailing with his son, and he made it
first time ever.
Yeah, for the first time ever. And he's like, it took a pandemic for us to sail together. So it was really cool to see those relationships build on the water as well. But yeah, we did make sure everyone knows that they were sailing at their own risk, and included that in our SIs and had a waiver.
There was a team that was sailing. It was a sailor with her roommate, and a roommate had never sailed before.
Yeah.
So she wanted to sail, and so she, you know, made it happen. So I think, you know, we had father sons. We had, you know, son and or I guess a couple of father sons. And you know, so it was neat, yeah, for sure, because someone's like, oh, I can't sail unless I sail with my kid, and then they're like, well, I'll just sail with my kid. Mm-hmm. So I think there was a comment by somebody, and I can't remember who it was right now. It doesn't really matter. If anyone knows Chuck Neville, he's a great guy, but you don't see him like glaringly smiling. And they saw that. He was smiling bigger than you could see. And he was sailing with his son, crewing for his son. And they did, number one, they did great, but obviously they had an awesome time. And, you know, it's just those things you probably wouldn't have seen before, you know, so.
I was just going to say, hopefully they had a good time and Chuck can sail with his son again. Hopefully, you know, they had a good experience with that. Hey, so I want to dive in a little bit, Shawn, with you on the debriefs, because that's kind of a little bit of the interesting thing that I got out of our kind of pre-show conversation a couple of days ago is, you know, usually, at least from my experience at regattas, you know, you'll get off the water, you'll go have a beer underneath the tent. You'll talk a little bit. You'll watch some video and be like, "Oh, that's me. That's cool." And you know, you'll talk a little bit about who may have fouled who or whatnot. But I think that at least from my standpoint, the opportunity kind of presented itself for you guys within the situation to have a couple days later really intense debriefs through Zoom calls. So I kind of wanted to dive in with you as to how you worked that, the ins and outs of it, and the benefits that you saw from it.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that we used, the one thing nice about being able to debrief like immediately after an event is it's all still really fresh in people's heads. So you can be like, all right, in the third race on like the second upwind, you know, blah, blah, blah. but when you have to wait a couple of days, it's a little more difficult, you know, to recall exactly what happened when. So what we did was employed a little technology, and we took, you know, there's a lot of really neat stuff going on right now with, you know, tracking and, you know, analytics and stuff, but, you know, a lot of the systems come at a pretty high price tag. So we are using a program called Sail22, which essentially lets you dump in log files from, you know, a variety of different sources and analyze it. So like we literally went through the shop and found, you know, any instrument that we had laying around, like demos and things like that, that record, you know, data. So we had, you know, Velocitex, the speed pucks are great. We had 2 of those. Some of these old Nova Sail units, you know, all the way up to a couple Race Geek units, which is insane overkill for a Vanguard 15. But we were using them like solely to record data. And with that, we're able to dump it in there, break it down by race, and start getting some cool, you know, some cool things. So, you know, just to give you a quick preview of, you know, the race reports. So I know a lot of people have been playing, you know, the virtual regatta. And if at the end of the race you look and kind of page over, you can see all the different statistics from the race. This essentially is giving us those, you know, in real life. So in race 4, I'm able to see, you know, who had the best start, you know, average speed, shortest distance sailed, you know, and then even turn on the map so I can look, you know, and see exactly, you know, who won the start. You know, Scotty, according to this, nailed it. He started at the boat. He's the gold track right there. You know, there's Schroff's track across the start. And then, and yeah, being able to use tools like this to, you know, have visuals to remind people of, you know, what was happening on the course, and then actually being able to look at the numbers and, you know, analyze them to see performance and compare, you know, who is doing what is definitely something that makes a virtual debrief a lot, you know, more visible and beneficial. I think we can do with this program is sync up all this GPS data with video and photos shot on the race course. So in the second event, we were shooting a lot of drone video, and essentially I was able to drop that into the player, and on the right, I would have a GPS track of what the boats are doing, their speed, and then on the left, it would show me exactly what was happening in real life on the race course. And, you know, tools like that are, you know, make it possible to do a lot, you know, remotely and virtually versus, you know, having to do a, you know, an in-person debrief.
One of the things that you mentioned, Megan, was that it wasn't just the sailors that were tuning into the debrief.
Yeah, so we did open the debrief to the entire fleet, and we saw it as a learning opportunity for everyone. And then we did post the videos later. We recorded them and posted them later on the class page as well. But I feel like making sure that everyone could see these debriefs, it's especially with the data that we're getting, it's almost like you're getting on the water coaching just in your living room. So people who weren't even competing could see exactly what maneuvers were made and what was good about those maneuvers, or what can we do better to improve them.
And I think there was a lot more talk too, because there was like, okay, you know, what Vang do you have? Do you have, you know, the maximum 12-1, or you have 6-1? And then people got to make opinions on that, and you know, and how it's set up, and you know, just how your boats are set up, and you know, the class is, you know, it's been around for a long time, and so, you know, some of the older boats may not have the Staymasters or the Vang, you know, optimized or whatever, and so it was very good to be able to hear, you know, the interaction both on, you know, not only how much Vang you used or main sheet you used or whatever, but also how much, what you did to your boat. So I think that was pretty important as well, and kind of shows how the class is it's such a great boat, and it kept it simple, and it basically allowed people really just to focus on sailing and having fun.
Yeah, it's something that it's like Ed was saying with the adjustments and things like that to the boat. Starting to use this tracking, the technology and analytics and stuff. Really this event was just kind of, an experiment to see all the different things we can do. But now, going forward, I think, we definitely know exactly what the best ways to use this stuff is. And one thing, even for sailors, which is something that we all should be doing kind of anyway, but having a little waterproof notepad out, and after every race, write down what all your settings were. When you do, a rig change, write down what race it was, what you changed to, and then in these debriefs, we can be like, all right, boat 5, what did you do between race 3, 4? Because you started going super fast upwind, not so great downwind. They'll be like, oh, okay, well, I put this on, took this off. And, the more just information we can accumulate and record and kind of, make a linear timeline of what's happening when and what adjustments were made, we can really do some cool stuff as far as figuring out how to sail these boats. And we can do it all, in our living rooms, online. We don't need to be all together.
Well, it brings the fleet up too, because if you just go home and you don't learn what happened, you may have not done very well, and so you're like, I'm not going to go back. But you can be like, oh well, I didn't make any changes, and I didn't realize people were making changes, and so now they're going to go back and they'll be okay. I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to set things up, and then I'll improve. And so there's a lot of ways to keep everyone there and bring them up, so nobody's struggling. And we really did see that, if anyone had any issues, the fleet was there to help and make them, get better. I think the biggest disappointment was the teams that sailed the last event, and that was their only event, because then they're like, oh, I should have been here the whole time.
Right. No, I think that's a great point. I think, Ed, that you made. One of the best things that I had ever heard was a new fleet captain was coming in and asked the outgoing fleet captain if they had any advice, and they said their one piece of advice was keep the back half of the fleet happy. The front half of the fleet is always going to be there. It's the back half of the fleet you got to keep happy and bring them up to continue on. Now, in the last kind of 10 minutes that we have here, I had 3 questions I wanted to ask, and have each of you answer, knowing that each of you kind of had a different role within this, Ed, in terms of the on-water race management and PRO and kind of the host, Meghan in terms of the class president and, running the administration side, and Shawn running the tech side of all the boats and the debriefs. So the first question is, in your estimation, your role, what did you find most challenging out of the whole series? I'll start with Ed.
Most challenging for me is really just balancing my family. These guys did a lot of the work. I would have liked to have helped more. I did help a little bit, but for me, it's a juggle. But I think also really it's really just, like I said, they did more than I did. So I think I really don't think there's anything bad or different, because we all grew and we all talked. And I think that made it so valuable that we learned along the way. So I don't think there's anything I can say that could have been better, other than, yeah, it'd be great to run the first one like the last one. But if you don't improve, then, if we would have gone the other direction, I guess I would have been frustrated or want to learn from it. But I think just the communication that we always kind of made sure we planned, having the debriefs in the middle of the week, I think were really good, because they kept us on top of things in the middle. And the only hard one was we did a Tuesday debrief one week, and that was harder because it was early in the week. So I think I would have liked to have helped more, but I was limited. And luckily we have been busy as a company. So I think these guys probably will have more just because they did way more of the work.
So Meghan, what's most challenging on the class administration side and running the regatta on that side?
I feel like the biggest challenge was making sure that our competitors felt safe. If they didn't feel safe, they weren't going to come down here. And I think when we first were presenting this regatta and trying to recruit people to come down, as we said, we did have a smaller turnout, but I feel like it took those people to then tell everyone else, hey, like this is what they're doing and they're constantly improving it. And I feel like listening to the competitors, reasons why they don't want to sail, because it could have been something I didn't think about. So I feel like that was like the biggest thing, was ensuring that our competitors feel safe and then following through with everything I was going to say that we were going to provide for them.
Shawn, what about you on the boat management side?
I think the hardest thing for me right now is not having another one of these, because I feel like we got it so dialed in. I feel like I have all the pieces, but one more shot to put them all together. But I think just using new technology, and that was, by saying I have all the pieces, that's just, trying to learn something like new and use something we've never used before with, the tracking, the analytics. Like the first event, like half the units weren't recording. And, and the second one, we got figured out how to overlay the drone with like the GPS. And now in this one, I had a call this morning with Sail Norge, and they walked me through, how to do all this stuff. So now, that's all in place. I really haven't had much time to like look and analyze the data. It's been just getting it like in there and figuring out like how to, put it all together. So now I can finally, before the debrief tonight, which anybody's welcome to tune into, actually go through it and figure out what this all means now that we're putting it all together. So yeah, I mean, like walking around in the middle of the night with units in my hand, figuring out which ones are recording, how accurate they are, it's definitely work and it's a challenge, but when it all comes together, it's pretty cool.
Time is the challenge, and I think the fourth event of any 3-event series is probably the best one.
Yeah, the fourth one's going to be great.
Yeah.
Best event's the next one, right?
Yeah.
So I'll start with Shawn on this next one, kind of give Ed a little time to think. I gave you a lot of time to think there, Shawn. So the next question is, out of everything that you experienced, what would you say the best experience or most rewarding thing to come out of this was for you?
I think just really seeing the, not just people back on the water, but the Vanguard, like just as a fleet kind of having that many, the fleet has been, not as strong as it used to be. And in Chicago, at least, it used to be an incredibly strong fleet. And, seeing 15 of these boats and people excited to sail them and people, really getting into it was really cool, because, I think this is going to be the summer of, dinghy sailing, summer of the little boats. And as a fleet, it definitely is a really great boat. And, I wish we'd have 1 billion of them out every Thursday in Chicago. So hopefully this, helps put things in the right direction for, making the class a lot stronger.
Sure. Meghan?
I feel like the coolest part of all this was working and collaborating and growing. I feel like this wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have the collaboration we had and the growth mindset we had. As you've heard multiple times through our talking, we were constantly communicating. We were constantly asking ourselves, how can we make this better? And we were learning from every single event. And I feel like, especially with with fleets trying to get back on the water, clubs trying to get back on the water, like you have to go in with that mindset. You have to go in thinking, okay, the first event may not be as strong, but we have to move forward and continue to learn. And I feel like we can't be scared to get back on the water either. We need to take that first leap and then continually learn and grow and share as a community how we're getting back on the water. And I feel like a lot of us are doing a great job of that.
Absolutely. Ed?
Yeah, I think we're all kind of on the same page here. I think the biggest thing in my mind is I don't feel like we missed something. You know, I'm not looking back going, hey, we should have made a documentary. We thought about that actually in between first and second week. You know, oh, I wish we would have done some technology. Oh, we did that. You know, I wish we would have got some drone footage. Oh, we did that. You know, I wish we would have got some better press. Well, we got a Sailing World article and a Sail World article. You know, we really, I mean, we've been doing this for a long time, especially Shawn and I, the last, you know, really since Shawn started working with us, doing like events that kind of lead up to this. And so this was the first one that was kind of ours.
Yeah.
That we didn't really have to ask, you know, can we do this? And so, you know, I think this was really good at doing what we all wanted to. We had 3 different people doing 3 different things, which is important, you know, because, you know, you can't do it all on your own. And, you know, we really create this thing that we can then do the next one for somebody else and get better and better. And I think the biggest thing is no regrets. We kind of checked the boxes and we thought of things ahead of time. That is important.
It's pretty incredible, like how, you know, it turned into, and, you know, it kind of grew very organically because, you know, to be totally honest, this started with, you know, the idea was, oh, let's just have like a few V15s come down and go like sailing. And, you know, when Meghan sent out the first email, like announcing this, you know, after a day of not hearing anything, we're just like, well, like, I know Meghan and I were like,
this isn't going to happen.
I don't know if anybody's going to come.
Yeah.
And Ed's just like, we just need like 2 other boats because your boat's down here, like 3 boats will be fine. And, you know, once, you know, people started saying yes, it just grew and grew and grew. And having, you know, being here and having, you know, Ed, to bounce ideas off of, having Meghan to organize all of it, what we were able to do in such a short amount of time was pretty incredible. You know, it really just on its own grew into something like, I think way bigger than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I literally told Shawn when they were going to go get, you know, boats, I'm like, if you get 3 boats and you have your boat, that's 4. That's enough. I mean, that would have been enough, but we had 7, you know, and then 7 turns into 14, which turns into, you know, we didn't grow the next, you know, but we stayed in our bounds as well.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I don't think 20 boats would have been as easy. And I think we would have probably said, maybe 15 is enough. So I think that was a big thing too.
The last question I have for you guys, and this is a question that I try to ask everyone when I'm on the Starboard portal on US Sailing's a video platform. And Meghan, I'll start with you. You know, it's more of an overall question of our sport, and knowing that, you know, a lot of people were very negative on the side of the lockdowns and the quarantines and the situation we're in. But I'd like to hear from you guys, you know, as we all are coming out from sheltering in place, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for our sport coming through into the summer?
I mean, just based on what we've done here, like experiencing and using new technology, I feel like even simple things like we talked about having a VHF in the radio, we wouldn't have done that, or having a VHF in the boat. We wouldn't have done that if we were in a pandemic. We wouldn't have done these in-depth debriefs if we weren't going through what we're going through right now. So I feel like it's very, very important to see that there's so much opportunity and there's so many things that are available to us that we didn't even realize were available. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind, is like, as we're growing, so is technology, and we can use that to definitely help us and support our fleet.
Ed, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for our sport, you know, coming out of hiding?
You know, I think it's, you know, we've proven that this system works, you know, and, you know, if we, you know, do this again, which we plan on, I mean, the RS-21 North Americans, I'm the PRO for in a couple weeks, you know, that's creating this adult sailing college sailing for adults. I think, you know, the not having to own a boat, you know, is kind of a big thing. And so I think it's just, you know, creating a system that you don't have to have 50 boats to be successful. And, you don't have, it's just, I guess, keep it simple. And that's what we did is we kept it simple. And I think that's what we kind of showed that can happen.
Shawn, what about you? What's the biggest opportunity you see for our sport coming out of this?
I think it's going to do wonders for like adult dinghy sailing is something that we're from Chicago, is definitely in our country in general in the U.S. There's not a whole lot of it, but it's it would be nice to see more of it. It would be nice to see these fleets, like the lasers and the V15s, start to grow again. In the U.S. and youth dinghy sailing is huge, and we're no problems with that. But once you graduate from like college, you move on to the big boats, or you kind of stop. So being able to do both, like you can still do your big boats, but on Thursday nights get like a bunch of friends out and go sail the little boats will be is a ton of fun. So I think this is definitely gonna help, because right now the two-man boats are the easiest boats to get going and do some organized sailing. The big boats will we're start figuring that out, but like dinghies can go right now, so.
For sure. So speaking of which, Meghan, being the class president, where can people learn more about the Vanguard 15 class and how to get involved? I know we have the B-15 Fleet 80 from Lake Norman, South Carolina, or North Carolina coming in and watching right now. But how can people get more information about the V-15 class?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier at the beginning that the V-15 class is doing a whole reboot. So we were dying for a little bit, but I feel like we have officers and everything now in place. We have a new website that will be launched by the end of next week. That will be a great place. We have the Vanguard 15 class Facebook page, and you can reach out to me as well, and I can put you in contact with your local fleet. So we're doing a huge reboot. The website is the one big thing that we really need to get out there and going, and that should be launched in about a week, 2 weeks. But that will where you find information.
Great. How do people get in touch with you, Meghan, if they want to reach out?
You can email me or Facebook Messenger me. My email is megan.e.o'rourke@gmail.com.
Great. And Ed, you mentioned kind of a little teaser as to what's up next for Sail22. You guys going down to Texas?
I'm going down to Texas to PRO the RS-21 North Americans, and Mark Set Bot's going to go with us with 3 bots. And so, unfortunately, we will not have Shawn there to make sure the boats stay in one piece, but we'll have Mark McNamara from KO Sailing down there. And so, I mean, basically, we learned a ton from this, that we're going to keep extending on. And then we've also backed a J70 series that'll be in Houston as well, at Houston Yacht Club. It'll be a bring your own J70 with charter boats available. That'll be at Houston Yacht Club. The middle of August, middle of September, October, and November, a 4-event series. And that's all we just launched that with our buddy Jay from Race Right, and Houston Yacht Club is hosting us. And that's going to be a big event just a big thing, because we're going to take what we've learned here and now we're moving it to the other classes. And I think that's what Sail22 does. We don't care what class you sail in, we'll support you. And so we'll go wherever we need. And right now, the Vanguard 15s locally, which we can help out nationally, which we are. The RS-21s down at Lakewood. They're the Lakewood's one bringing me down, and then the J70s that we're working with. So we're just trying to help get people on the water and get sailing.
Cool. And Shawn, you mentioned you were itching after the 3rd one, wishing there was a 4th. So when's the next one?
Well, so that really, all these boats are from Chicago. So we're kind of on right, everybody's waiting any day to hear news about what's going to happen, to the harbors there. These boats probably will go back to Chicago soon. We're doing one just little fun event this weekend. and then probably before nationals, in the fall, we're hoping to do another bigger event here, a little tune-up clinic, and try to do some team racing. Then Nashville for nationals, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
It sounds like Chicago and Lake Culver, Indiana are the new hotspots for the Vanguard 15 class. Any last words from any of you guys before we sign off? I know we've been going for just over an hour, but anything else you guys want to let everyone know about?
I think just keep an eye out for the documentary that we worked with Meghan's brother on. It was one of those things where I'm like, okay, guys, we know anyone who does documentary films, and Meghan's like, my brother does. And so he's done a phenomenal job, and looks like we'll be having something very soon. Josh has seen the first edit, which really was awesome. We're just getting graphics and that type of thing sorted out. So look for a documentary coming out, hopefully by the end of the week, if not early next week. And then just stay tuned to the Facebook pages of Sail22 and Vanguard 15 classes.
Yeah, if you guys also, if anyone viewing wants to see one of our debriefs in depth, we do have a debrief tonight, 8 o'clock Eastern, and I can post the Zoom information in a comment as soon as we're done. But we do have an in-depth debrief tonight where we go over all the analytics. Yeah,
that'll be taking a pretty deep dive into the actual analytics side of the Sail Norge and comparing some stuff. So it should be good.
That'd be great. Please put that in the comments. That's 8 o'clock Eastern time tonight, 3 hours from now, just under 3 hours from now.
Yeah,
so,
we have a lot to do in 3 hours.
Yeah, so look for that in the comments. We'll let you guys get to your, organizing your debrief. But thank you three for joining us, and thank you guys for putting on the series and kind of showing us how it's done. We're all learning on the fly. We're all kind of building the airplane in the air, but you guys have started to figure it out. So thanks for sharing your experiences, and we look forward to some more experiences and getting over to Lake Culver for the next one.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
See you.
What happened?